But that's where the Magi were. They traveled 900 miles on foot with animals, making their way to a star, making their way to see what was happening with this star. And I think that is an amazing, amazing feat that they were able to accomplish. This morning, I want to speak just a little bit about Epiphany, that story of the Magi or the wise guys or the wise men, depending on what version of the Bible you have, making their way to Jesus. And we know that this story happens a time after Jesus is born. It's not like he is born, the shepherds come, and then the Magi are there. And we know that because the next story that we read within Matthew is Herod saying, the Magi outwitted me, and so now go and kill all baby boys who are 2 years old and under, which gives us the inclination that this may have happened up to 2 years after Jesus was born. But within this story, I want to talk just a little bit about the travels of the Magi. So I don't know about you, but our family did some traveling. How many of you did travel over anywhere from 3,000 miles to 10 miles so that you got to see some people that you know and love, right? Our family, it was 1,200 miles we put on the car going to different places to see people, right? And as we did that, right, a lot of us went to those places because there was something there that was drawing us, right? It might have been family, it might have been friends, it might have been a good movie. We traveled for a lot of different reasons, right? But now here we find ourselves working towards getting back into the swing of things of school and work and whatever else may come. And in our family, it doesn't really seem like we've hit the swing of 2024 yet because school doesn't start until tomorrow, so everyone's been home. So as we look at the start of 2024, what does it look like for you? I know a lot of people I've talked to over the last week or so have talked about they just don't know what's happening. Or maybe they're fearful at what is going to happen within our country's makeup this year. Or they might just doubt that it's going to be a good year. There's so many things that are happening that create these kind of fear of the unknown and this doubt of what is to come. Well, that's not a new thing. I think that's actually was probably going on while the Magi were around too. But the Magi had something happen to them that kind of changed their story from something of that nature of being fearful and doubting into something where they had a thing to look forward to, right? And so the Magi took this journey, and biblical scholars, much smarter than I am, say that they traveled around 900 miles. Now, I did a Google search, and I said, okay, let's drop down to I-70, and let's just head west just to see what it'd be like if we went on a 900-mile trek from here. From St. Michael, we're just going to go. It puts us at a Sonic drive-in in the middle of nowhere in Colorado. Now, I know you probably like cherry limeades enough to go on foot, 8 miles a day for however many days till we could go get that limeade. But I'm guessing it's a lot easier for us just to think about not doing that. But that's where the Magi were. They traveled 900 miles on foot with animals, making their way to a star. Making their way to see what was happening with this star. And I think that is an amazing, amazing feat that they were able to accomplish. And as they go, they meet with Herod. And we see two things in this story. We see that the Magi are genuinely and authentically curious about what is happening. They really want to know where this baby is. And I had a friend of mine who called this, they're being overjoyed at seeing the star, and they're leaning in this authentic way. He called it leaning in, right? So they had something that was curious, that made them curious, and they leaned into it. On the other hand, we see Herod, and Herod wants nothing to do with this new baby and actually wants to create fear and doubt. So he's leaning away from the curiosity. He wants to know about it, but only so he can direct it in a different way. But the Magi, they lean into this idea of there is something else out there. There is something better for us. Wherever the star may lead us, we know that there is something we can connect to. And so, when they get there, they bow down and they worship him. They move from a posture that says we're leaning in and we're curious, we want to know more, to one that says this baby is going to change our story. This baby means something more than just a little kid in a manger with his mom. And so they worship him and they change their posture. And the story goes on that in a dream they're told to go back a different way. And I can only imagine that as they were going, being touched by the baby Jesus and worshiping him, they shared that story of what it meant to them to be connected to Jesus as they went. And so what does this all mean, and what can we grab from this story of the Magi leaning in, being curious about who Jesus was, and then being touched by his life in a way that means something to them? Well, I think we need to fast forward the story just a little bit, right? So this takes place in Matthew 2. But if we fast forward through Jesus' ministry, where he goes and he touches people who are untouchable. He dines with people who no one wanted to eat with. He goes and he heals people who had infirmities that no one really wanted to deal with. And then he goes to the cross out of love for those people and for all of us. And then he goes, and there's an empty tomb that we celebrate on Easter. And after that, he is with his disciples. And he says this, he says, "Go and make disciples." And that's from Matthew 28. And as he says that, we need to realize that he's actually talking to disciples. He's talking to people who have leaned into him, who were so curious about his story. They followed him for 3 years, wanting to know more and more. And what they discovered is that his story was full of love and forgiveness, and it brought hope to the hopeless. And so Jesus says to these disciples, "Go and make disciples." And in that, we have disciples who are making disciples. And I think that's us today. My hope is that we have a curiosity that helps us lean into who Jesus is. That helps us say, you know what, there's something different about his story, and we want to be connected to that. We want to be connected to that grace, that love and forgiveness that brings hope. And as we do that, as we lean in and we become more connected to Jesus, not because we're so great, but because he is, there's this idea that Other people want to know our story. Other people are leaning into us and want to know a little bit more about your family or what you do at work or a little bit more in the classroom. All kinds of different areas in our lives, I think God has put people there that lean in a little bit. And I also think that this is an opportunity for us. That just as the wise men were looking for something, yearning for something, and leaned into who Jesus was because they knew that that love and forgiveness that he was going to offer was there. There's foreigners coming into a new land. Here we are as well. We have that love and forgiveness. And so within that, we have an opportunity to share it with the people around us. And so in your bulletin, there's some arrows, right? And my hope is that that arrow that looks up is our connection with Jesus, that you know that Jesus' love and forgiveness and that hope are there for you. And if you don't, let's go have lunch. Let's talk about that a little bit. But the other arrow is leaning in a little bit. And my hope for you this year is that as you know Christ's love and forgiveness in your life, that you would have a couple people who come to mind for you that are leaning in, that want to know a little bit more. And so how can you be intentional with those people? How can you share your story of connection with those people who come to mind? Can you do it through a lunch? Or can you do it through coffee? Can you do it through just a walk around a park? There's so many ways for us to connect intentionally with other people in our lives. And I think as we do that, we have an opportunity to share our connection with Jesus with them and to change their story. So just as the Magi made their way for 900 miles in order to see what was happening with the star, because they were curious and they were leaning in, and their story changed to one of knowing Jesus, being connected to him in the manger. So does ours. And with that, we have people leaning into our story. My prayer and my hope is that you're able to share your connection with Jesus with those who are leaning into you this year. Amen.